The need for approval, from tribal roots to digital likes. Have you ever noticed how a tiny little thumbs up on a screen can completely change your mood for the better? Or how one single critical comment from a total stranger can literally ruin your entire day? Well, in this explainer, we're unpacking the fascinating neuroscience and psychology behind this deeply, deeply human craving. So let's dive right into an experience I think we can all relate to. You know, the exact feeling. You post a photo or maybe share a thought online, and then you just kind of wait. You check your phone, waiting for that tiny red notification to pop up, and while you're staring at the screen, your heart is quietly asking, do I matter? Did they like it? We have absolutely all been there, just waiting for our peers to validate our existence. And here's the science behind exactly why that happens. When someone likes your post, your brain's reward system, specifically these areas called the ventral striatum and the nucleus accumbens, releases a sudden rush of dopamine. It gives you this tiny, potent hit of pleasure. It's actually the exact same neural pathway that lights up when you say eat a delicious piece of chocolate cake or win some money. Basically, your brain treats those digital likes as highly rewarding treats, and that creates a loop where you start to crave that feeling again and again. But I want to make something really clear right off the bat. This craving for validation, it's not some modern weakness or a character flaw. Not at all. It's actually a deeply embedded survival mechanism. It is hardwired into the very architecture of our minds. Long, long before smartphones were even a thought, our brains were being shaped by the intense, literal life or death pressures of our environment. Think about it like this. Thousands of years ago, survival meant protection, sharing resources, and really belonging to a tight-knit tribe. Fast forward to today, and our environment has changed drastically, right? But our brains, well, they really haven't. Our ancient brains are constantly misinterpreting the modern world, basically mistaking the accumulation of likes, views, and followers on social media as actual survival signals. To really grasp why our brains overreact like this, we've got to look back at our ancestors. Look, unlike a lot of other animals, early humans didn't exactly have thick armor or huge fangs or the ability to sprint away from predators. Our only real advantage was each other. In our ancestral past, being excluded from the group was a literal death sentence. You lose your protection, you lose your food, so evolution hardwired us to desperately seek social approval, simply because being part of the group is what kept you alive. So the crucial question we have to ask next is, what actually happens in our minds when we don't get that necessary approval? Or even worse, when we're actively ignored or ostracized? If belonging equals survival, then rejection must set off some massive alarm bells in our nervous system, right? And these fMRI scans reveal something absolutely astonishing. Researchers mapped out what happens in the brain when someone goes through physical pain, and they compared it to what happens during social exclusion. The overlapping neural activity is almost perfect. It's crazy. Your brain essentially doesn't distinguish between physical and social pain. They both light up the exact same regions. Yeah, you read that right. A broken bond hurts just like a broken bone. Because belonging is so absolutely critical to keeping our physical bodies alive. Parts of our brain, like the anterior cingulate cortex, step in to ensure that social exclusion triggers a highly visceral, actual physical ache. It's basically an evolutionary warning system screaming at you to fix your social standing before you end up all alone in the wilderness. And as researchers like Roy Baumeister have found, this intense, agonizing pain of social rejection completely scrambles our normal behavior. When someone is excluded, they often become temporarily defensive, a lot less helpful, and sometimes even aggressive towards strangers. I mean, it just hurts too much to put yourself out there again. Yet, at the very same time, deep down, that rejected person harbors a highly cautious, almost desperate desire to find new friends, to replace the connection they just lost. So, to avoid this agonizing pain of exclusion altogether, our minds had to get smart. They developed specialized, highly intuitive tools to constantly read the room, so to speak, and assess our social standing. We are pretty much always unconsciously asking, do they still like me? Am I still safe? One of the best ways to understand this is through a psychological concept called the sociometer. Just think of the sociometer as the internal gas gauge on your car's dashboard. But instead of measuring fuel, it measures your social acceptance. According to researcher Mark Leary, when your self-esteem feels low, you aren't fundamentally broken. It's really just a warning light flashing on your dashboard, telling you that your belonging tank is running low, and hey, you might be at risk of being socially isolated. Then there's another really beautiful but delicate concept, the looking glass self.
This explains how, right from early childhood, we figure out who we are by using the reactions of our parents and our peers as reflective mirrors. If you do something and your parents smile and praise you, that mirror reflects back a capable, good person. We are literally building our identity out of the reflections we get from the people around us. But the danger arises when we forget that these are just reflections. As we grow older, we can easily slip into outsourcing our self-worth entirely to these external mirrors. We end up basically begging the world to dictate our value rather than finding it internally. We let other people's opinions become the absolute sole judge of whether or not we are enough. And that brings us right to the modern dilemma. Today, instead of a small, stable tribe of maybe 50 neighbors, we've stepped onto the massive digital stage. We are facing an unpredictable slot machine of digital mirrors, exposing every thought and photo to hundreds or even thousands of strangers at once. The unpredictable nature of when we get a like, what psychologists call a variable reward schedule, creates these compulsive checking habits that our tribal brains simply were not built to handle. Over time, these digital metrics, the likes, the shares, the view counts, they start to whisper a really dangerous lie. They trick your brain into believing that your complex, beautiful human worth can somehow be easily calculated, just like simple statistics on a screen. The logic becomes, if the number goes up, you matter. If the number stays low, you don't. And to make matters worse, because our brains are always scanning the environment for threats to our survival and our belonging, a single negative comment can easily overshadow dozens of positive ones. Literally 10 people can call you a genius, but your inner caveman will completely panic over one random person leaving a mean comment on your post. Your brain genuinely treats it as a literal threat of exile. So how do we actually fix this? Well, to break this exhausting loop, we first have to recognize our brain's ancient wiring and just give ourselves a little grace. Then we need to set healthy boundaries that keep our need for digital validation in check. This means using these platforms to connect authentically rather than just performing for an audience. It means carefully curating your feed to block out toxic mirrors and shifting your focus from endlessly comparing yourself to others to simply creating and sharing what you actually love. I really want you to remember the core message of this explainer. Craving connection is not a flaw. Wanting to be liked is not a sign of weakness. It is the exact evolutionary trait that kept our ancestors alive and allowed humanity to build cooperative cultures in the first place. It is beautifully, deeply human. But armed with this knowledge, we no longer have to let that internal gas gauge completely control our every waking move. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, empowering thought to carry with you today. Take a moment, step away from all the digital mirrors, look inward, and really ask yourself, if your self-worth is no longer just a number on a screen, who are you? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating topic with me. Stay curious, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.